Subscribe to True Tears Stories for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Jordan wasn't the kind of man who checked his bank statements obsessively. He'd always believed in a little breathing room, trusting that if he worked hard and stayed within reason, the numbers would more or less take care of themselves. But that morning, as he sipped lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug and casually opened the banking app on his phone, something flickered in his chest. A charge he didn't recognize. Maison Aurel, it read, a boutique downtown. High-end, no question. He blinked at the total, $732.84, and tilted his head, trying to place it. There was no memory of shopping there, no holiday coming up, no forgotten gift he might have bought. Just the cold certainty that someone else had. His stomach tightened in that quiet, instinctual way that precedes understanding. It wasn't just a mistake. It was Kayla. The thought arrived uninvited, but fully formed. Kayla, with her soft voice and curated Instagram feed. Kayla, who'd once joked about how naughty it felt to buy herself something with his card for the first time, as if it were some cheeky accident. That had been months ago, and he hadn't made a fuss. He'd just smiled, said, "Just ask next time," and brushed it off. But now, it didn't feel cheeky. It felt planned. He clicked into the transaction, staring at the timestamp. 2 days ago, a Thursday afternoon. He'd been in back-to-back meetings at the time. He remembered the headache, the overtime, and while he was glued to spreadsheets and sales reports, Kayla had apparently been out buying something worth nearly a week's groceries. He didn't say anything right away, not even when she breezed into his apartment later that evening, arms full of grocery bags and her voice honey-sweet. "Thought I'd cook tonight," she said. "You've been working so hard." Jordan watched her from across the room. Her hair was tucked behind one ear, gold hoops catching the kitchen light. She was humming as she unpacked arugula and goat cheese and strawberries. Her eyes sparkled when she looked at him, and for a second, he wondered if he was being paranoid. Until she opened the silverware drawer, and out tumbled a receipt, curled at the corner, like it had been waiting to reveal itself. She scooped it up fast, too fast, and shoved it in her coat pocket. "Oops," she muttered with a laugh. "Old dry cleaning thing." Jordan nodded, said nothing. But he saw the logo. Maison Aurel. That night, he didn't sleep much. He lay next to her in the dark, the rise and fall of her breath steady beside him. His eyes traced the ceiling, counting shadows. It wasn't the money, not really. He could afford $700, even $7,000 if it came to that. But it was the lie. The quiet theft dressed as charm. The way she could smile and serve dinner, like she hadn't just used his card without asking. It made something shift inside him, something small, but final. The next morning, Kayla kissed him on the cheek before heading to a yoga class and said, "Let's do a fancy date night soon. You deserve a break." He nodded again, as if on cue. And when the door closed behind her, he reached for his phone and made a reservation. Not just any reservation, a place she'd been hinting about for weeks. Opal and Sage, impossible to book, elegant, exclusive, and expensive. He secured a table for Friday night. Then he called the restaurant directly to make a special request. "I'd like to be the only one with a bill at the end," he said. "In fact, I'd like to cancel the card she plans to use without her knowing." The hostess on the line was silent for a beat. "You're sure?" she asked. "I am." Because this wasn't about vengeance. This was about truth. If she'd been using him like a silent sponsor, then it was time she learned what life looked like when the curtain was pulled back. He spent the rest of the week watching, not stalking, just observing. How often she reached for her phone, smiling into the screen. How her wardrobe seemed to refresh itself every other day. New earrings, new scarves, a handbag that hadn't existed a week ago. She still complimented him, still touched his hand in public, still texted heart emojis. But Jordan had started listening between the words, and what he heard wasn't love, it was a transaction. By Thursday, he had mapped it all out, not just the dinner, the exit strategy, his boundaries, what he'd say and what he wouldn't. There was something oddly empowering about it, like preparing for a performance he no longer needed to pretend in. He stared out his office window that evening as the city hummed below. Neon signs flickered. People rushed home with plastic bags and weary smiles. Jordan, once the man who had bent backwards to keep the peace, now felt calm. Not angry, not cold, just done. Friday arrived with the kind of golden dusk that made the city feel like a film set. Soft light pouring through tall windows, honking muted beneath the weight of a busy weekend. Jordan dressed in silence. Crisp button-down, navy jacket, polished shoes. He took his time, tied the knot in his tie twice before deciding he didn't want to wear one at all. Let it be casual. Let it be disarming. Kayla was already glowing when he picked her up. Not from makeup, though that was flawless, but from the glow that came with anticipation. Her dress shimmered faintly in the fading sun, and her perfume curled through the car like memory. "This place is impossible to get into," she said, giddy. "How did you even pull this off?" He smiled. "Just lucky, I guess." She leaned over to kiss his cheek. "Remind me to spoil you later." The restaurant was every bit as beautiful as its reputation. Candlelight danced on the walls. The host greeted them like old friends. Their table overlooked a small courtyard strung with lights, delicate vines twisting up the trellis. It was the kind of setting Kayla lived for, the kind she photographed for her Instagram stories, always with captions like, "Date night with my king," and "Grateful for love." She ordered confidently. The truffle risotto, a cocktail with gold flakes in the ice. Jordan let her lead. He asked about her day, nodded in the right places, laughed at the right jokes. But inside, he wasn't playing along. He was paying attention. Halfway through the meal, she excused herself to the restroom. Her phone buzzed on the table. Without touching it, he glanced at the preview. "Can't wait for that bag tomorrow." It was from someone named V. He sipped his water. His fingers tightened slightly around the glass. He knew that name. V was her college friend, the one who always joked about manifesting rich men. Jordan had met her once. She didn't remember his name. Kayla returned all smiles, unaware that her world was moments from changing. As dessert arrived, dark chocolate mousse with a sugared violet, Jordan reached for his phone and typed a brief message. Just a single confirmation. Then he looked up and said softly, "There's something I've been thinking about." She tilted her head, spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "Oh?" "I've been thinking a lot about how trust works." Kayla blinked. "Okay." "You know what's interesting?" he continued. "Trust isn't always about the big stuff. Sometimes it's about the quiet choices, the ones made when no one's watching." She smiled thinly. "Babe, what are you talking about?" He leaned in slightly. like swiping someone's card for a designer store while they're at work. The smile cracked. What? I saw the charge, Kayla. Maison Aurel, Thursday afternoon. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her shoulders stiffened. I was going to tell you, but you didn't, he said, voice calm. You never do. Her hand found her wine glass, but didn't lift it. It was just a bag, she muttered. It's not like I drained your savings or something. That's not the point. She stared at him. So what? This whole night was a setup? Just so you could scold me over dinner? No, he said. This dinner was your gift, my way of saying goodbye. Silence expanded between them. Thick, inevitable. You're breaking up with me? Her voice was sharp now, disbelief lining each word. I'm ending a lie, he said. She laughed bitterly. Because of one charge? Because of the pattern? He pushed the spoon across the table gently. You've been using me, Kayla, and maybe I let you. That's on me. But it ends now. As she opened her mouth again, the waiter arrived with the bill. Here you are, sir, he said, placing it between them. Kayla reached into her purse, maybe out of habit. She pulled out her card, the one he'd canceled that morning, slid it toward the folder. The waiter returned moments later, polite but firm. I'm sorry, ma'am. The card's been declined. She looked at Jordan, eyes wide. Did you? He didn't gloat, didn't flinch. I called the bank this morning, had it canceled. Her face flushed deep red. You embarrassed me. No, he said, rising from his seat, dropping his own card on the tray. You embarrassed yourself. He paid quickly, nodding thanks to the staff, and turned toward the door. She called after him once. His name, sharp and cutting, but he didn't turn around. Outside, the air was cooler, the night quiet. He walked slowly, not in triumph, but in release. He didn't check his phone, didn't replay the conversation. He simply inhaled, exhaled, and kept walking. Not away from her, but towards something honest. Jordan didn't cry. He thought he might. He'd invested more than time into that relationship, but the tears never came. What did arrive, in the quiet hush of the next morning, was a strange calm. The kind that made his coffee taste sharper, the air feel cleaner, like he had been holding his breath for months without realizing. He didn't talk about what happened right away. Not to his friends, not to his coworkers. He didn't want their well-meaning sympathy or their hindsight judgments. I always had a weird feeling about her, someone would say, and he'd have to nod like that helped. But the truth was, she hadn't started out that way. Or maybe she had, and he just hadn't wanted to see it. The real sting wasn't even the money. It was the manipulation, the slow erosion of trust. The way Kayla had looked at him when the card was declined, like he had betrayed her. That look haunted him more than her silence after he walked away, because it told him everything. In her eyes, he wasn't a partner. He was a provider, a walking, breathing gold card with feelings optional. Still, habits die hard. For days after, he caught himself checking her social media, but everything had gone dark. No new posts, no cryptic quotes, no revenge selfies. She'd either blocked him or gone ghost to rebrand. Then came the message. A week later, Sunday morning. A soft ping from an unknown number. The first line was enough. I can't believe you humiliated me like that. Jordan sat with the phone in his hand for a long time. He didn't respond right away. He stared out the window instead, watched the early light stretch across his balcony. The silence of his apartment felt full in a way it hadn't before, like peace had weight, and he'd finally stopped pushing against it. The second ping came an hour later. "You acted like I never meant anything to you." And there it was. The bait. The implication that if he didn't respond, he was the monster. The man who discarded her coldly. She was rewriting the story in real time, and part of him itched to correct the narrative. But he didn't. Instead, he got up, made breakfast, and turned off his phone. Over the next few weeks, he started noticing how many small decisions he'd outsourced to Kayla. What they ate, where they went, how he dressed. She had been a curator of their life together, choosing the right restaurants, posting just the right angles, painting their love in brushstrokes designed for applause. But now, he bought groceries without checking if they were aesthetic. He picked restaurants based on craving, not clout. He wore his favorite ratty hoodie on walks without apology. One night, while reorganizing his closet, he found the gift box she'd given him for their last anniversary. A silk tie, still in its packaging. He hadn't worn it. He remembered her handing it to him, eyes bright, saying, "Now you'll look like someone with a corner office." Back then, he'd laughed. Now, the words sat sour in his stomach. He closed the box and slid it onto the shelf, not out of anger, but as a marker, a reminder of the person he used to be. The one who confused ambition with identity, who let someone else define what success looked like, and more dangerously, what love did. Jordan didn't swear off dating. He wasn't bitter, but he was recalibrated. The next time someone asked him out, he said yes with caution, not because he was afraid, but because he'd learned that charm and connection don't mean the same thing. One Saturday, at a quiet rooftop bar downtown, he met someone new. Her name was Simone. She worked in community planning, had ink on her fingertips from sketching out transit lines, and ordered hot tea instead of wine. Their conversation wasn't electric, but it was steady, honest. She didn't ask about his job title or what kind of car he drove. She asked about books, about childhood, about what he thought made people stay. At one point, she said something simple. "I think the way people spend money says a lot about how they spend love." He blinked. "Sorry," she added quickly. "That probably sounded pretentious." "No," he said. "That might be the most honest thing I've heard in a long time." They didn't make plans for a second date right away, but she walked with him to the train, and when they said goodbye, she looked him in the eyes, not past him, not at herself in the window's reflection, and said, "Thanks for the conversation." Not the dinner, not the drinks, the conversation. He went home and sat in the quiet again. Let it wash over him. No games, no second guessing. Just air, tea, and space that didn't echo anyone else's expectations. That night, his phone buzzed one more time. "Kayla, hope you're happy. You got what you wanted." He deleted it, because what he'd wanted was never revenge. It was clarity, and he'd finally found it. Jordan never replied to her final message. The weight it once might have carried didn't land anymore. It passed through him like wind through a screen door, present but powerless. There was nothing left in him that needed closure, from someone who had rewritten every page of their story with disappearing ink. By fall, the leaves outside his apartment had begun to change, their color rich and certain. That was how he felt now, changed but not hardened, rebuilt but not unrecognizable. Simone texted again. They met for coffee this time. She brought her sketchbook. He brought a book of poetry he hadn't touched in years. They sat outside, the city's nights muted by the soft clink of ceramic mugs and the warm scent of cinnamon in the air. I used to think love meant losing parts of yourself, he admitted after a long pause. Simone glanced up. And now? He smiled. Now I think it's supposed to help you find the parts you forgot. She didn't answer right away, just reached across the table and placed her hand gently over his. It was a small gesture, but it landed deeply. Not because it was grand, but because it was real. The next time Jordan saw Kayla was accidental. He was on a late lunch break, picking up takeout from a Thai place they used to frequent. She stepped in just as he turned from the counter. For a second, neither of them moved. She wore oversized sunglasses and held her phone like a lifeline. Her lips parted, like she might say something. He nodded politely, as if she were a neighbor he vaguely remembered from a building long since left behind. She didn't speak. He didn't stop. Back at his office, he unpacked the food and took a deep breath before eating. It tasted better than he remembered, not because the recipe had changed, but because he wasn't swallowing it with resentment. That night, as the city lights blinked on and the street outside his window softened into shadow, Jordan sat down to write. Not for work, not for productivity, just to see what would come out when no one was watching. He started with a single line. I thought she was building something with me, but it turns out I was the scaffolding. It wasn't angry. It wasn't accusatory. It was just true. He wrote for hours. The days grew shorter. The chill crept in. Simone came over one evening with a basket of pastries and a stack of library books. They didn't go out. They didn't perform for anyone. They cooked pasta together, badly, and danced a little to old jazz records that popped and crackled. There was no anniversary, no post about couple goals, just warmth, just presence. One morning, while folding laundry, Jordan found a receipt tucked into the pocket of a coat he hadn't worn since spring. A boutique name, a jewelry purchase, Kayla's birthday gift. He turned it over once in his hands. There was a time this small slip of paper would have gutted him. Now, he simply folded it and dropped it in the trash. It was just paper, not proof, not pain, not anything that could define him anymore. What stayed with him were smaller things, how it felt to walk without checking his reflection in every surface, how it felt to listen to music just because, how it felt to share space with someone without fearing what would happen if he didn't meet their unspoken standard that day. He understood now. Love wasn't about fixing or proving. It wasn't about filling someone else's voids while ignoring your own. It was this. Dinner burning slightly in the oven because the conversation was too good to interrupt. Mismatched socks on a rainy Tuesday. A text from Simone that simply read, I saw something that made me think of you. Hope your day's soft. It was the softness that struck him most, because Kayla had never allowed for that. Soft was weakness. Soft was naive. But Simone saw softness as a strength. And now, so did he. Months passed. Kayla never tried to contact him again. He heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd moved cities, gotten a new job. Someone said she was dating again. Someone serious. Someone well-connected. Jordan didn't flinch. He wished her well in the quiet of his thoughts, and that was enough. His life wasn't dramatic now. It wasn't a highlight reel. It was Tuesday night grocery runs and laughing too hard over cheap wine. It was paying attention, not playing along. And on one of those ordinary nights, as he and Simone sat curled on the couch watching a documentary, she rested her head on his shoulder and said, "You're nothing like I expected." He turned to her, curious. "What did you expect?" She smiled sleepily. "Someone harder. Someone with walls." Jordan looked toward the window, where the city's lights blinked like distant stars. "I used to be," he said, "but I figured out how to stop building rooms for people who only needed me for the view." She didn't ask for an explanation. She just reached for his hand again, and this time he held on. The apartment was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. That was the difference now. Silence wasn't a threat or a punishment. It was peace. It was space to breathe, to choose, to exist without trying so hard to earn someone else's approval. Jordan had spent years giving and giving, only to realize he was always the one left with the receipts. But now, he gave because he wanted to, because there was no transaction behind it, no balancing act. He thought about that dinner, when he canceled everything mid-date. It had felt rash in the moment, dramatic. But really, it was the first honest decision he'd made in years, not out of revenge, out of clarity. That was the beginning of learning what he was worth, not in dollars, not in roles, but in presence. Now, when he caught his own reflection, he didn't brace. He nodded. He looked back. He saw someone who had been used but not broken. Someone who had been taken for granted but never erased. Someone who had chosen himself, not with anger, but with grace. And maybe that's what healing looked like, not giant victories or cinematic moments. Just making dinner without dread. Just walking into your own home and not holding your breath. One day at a time. One truth at a time. Jordan poured himself a glass of water, the hum of the fridge steady behind him. He leaned on the counter and watched the sky go from blue to blush. He thought of Kayla only in passing now, like a chapter that had been dog-eared too long. He didn't hate her. He just didn't need her story to keep writing his own.